We begin with Bangladesh again, where things are going from bad to worse. After jailing a Hindu priest on charges of sedition, Dhaka now wants to ban ISKCON, a Hindu religious organization, which it has branded as fundamentalist. This has triggered protests and political debates in India. We'll tell you where this is heading. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the PTI protest has suddenly ended, with Imran Khan's wife Bushra Bibi fleeing the scene, apparently after a rift within his party, the PTI. In China, a defense minister may be fired for the third time in 2 years thanks to Xi Jinping's endless corruption crackdown that has swallowed millions of careers. In West Asia, there's finally a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. We'll tell you what comes next. In the US, there's a drug crisis. We'll discuss why Donald Trump blames China for it, why Justin Trudeau panic-called Trump, and why he was dancing at a Taylor Swift concert while Canadians were protesting. Why the UK Prime Minister has declared that Britain is not working. Why companies in America are rolling back their diversity commitments. How airlines make money off junk fees. And how Gen Z is taking over dictionaries. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. China warns New Zealand against joining the AUKUS security grouping. Beijing says it would have negative consequences for Wellington's relationship with China. AUKUS was formed in 2021 by the US, UK and Australia to push back against China's growing influence in the Asia-Pacific region. Russian President Vladimir Putin arrives in Kazakhstan for a 2-day trip. In recent months, trade ties between Moscow and its Central Asian ally have frayed. Kazakhstan is a member of the Moscow-led CSTO security alliance, but has expressed concerns over the almost 3-year-long Ukraine conflict. Indonesians vote to pick local leaders in the country's biggest simultaneous regional election. President Subianto is seeking to consolidate his grip on power. More than 200 million people were eligible to vote. The focus was on the race for the next governor of the capital, Jakarta. Namibia also voted today to choose their new president. It's a big test for the ruling party, which has governed the southern African country since its independence in 1990. The vice president is in the running. If she wins, she will be Namibia's first female president. And the price of Arabica coffee hits the highest level since 1977 in trading. A pound of its beans listed in New York crossed $320. This comes amid concerns of limited supplies caused by drought in Brazil this year. Brazil is the world's largest coffee producer. The honeymoon is well and truly over. Muhammad Yunus is facing the harsh realities of Bangladesh, mindless street violence, emboldened radical Islamists and frightened minorities. Simply put, it's a big mess. First, let me show you pictures from Chattogram. That's where the action is unfolding. Yesterday, a Hindu priest was denied bail by the local court there. He was charged with sedition. And that decision triggered a violent standoff. Hindu supporters on one side, lawyers and police on the other. One lawyer was killed in this violence and his colleagues are blaming Hindu protesters for his death. It's become a major rallying point in the country. The lawyer's funeral rites were held today. Just look at the turnout. Several protests were also held. Most of them had the same demands: justice for the slain lawyer and a ban on ISKCON. Now, ISKCON is a global Hindu organization. They have more than 650 temples across the world. They run children's programs. They run food programs. They sometimes also do relief work. But pretty soon, ISKCON could be banned in Bangladesh. Lawyers have filed a petition in the country's top court. The interim regime also appears to be on board. They have called ISKCON a religious fundamentalist organization. This is Dhaka's view. ISKCON is a religious fundamentalist organization. How about that? The rioters who destroyed Hindu temples are revolutionaries. But a temple authority is fundamentalist. It tells you everything you need to know about the new Bangladesh and what their unelected leader Muhammad Yunus is up to. Either he can't see the violence on the ground, or he doesn't care about it, or he is powerless to stop it. And frankly, I don't know which is worse. In the last 24 hours, 3 Hindu temples have been attacked in Chattogram, again by revolutionaries, I assume. Take a look at this. Last we checked, no arrests have been made in this case. Very different from yesterday's crackdown. When Hindus protested peacefully, the cops responded with violence, with tear gas and batons. They also arrested 21 people for vandalism. Let's see if similar action is taken here, though frankly I wouldn't hold my breath. What's needed right now is deft leadership in Dhaka, a mix of carrots and sticks. You must reach out to the Hindu minority. You must also use force to uphold law and order. But Muhammad Yunus does not seem capable of it. Just look at what's happened this month. On November 18th, college students in Dhaka went on a rampage. They attacked a train and wounded passengers. On November 20th, the students were at it again. They attacked school buses and clashed on the streets. Around 15 people were injured. Then on November 24th, another showdown. College students once again locked horns in Dhaka. More than 30 of them were injured. And yesterday, same scenes. Students on a rampage with sticks and rods. The cause of this violence is not clear. Some blame college rivalries, others blame so-called outside factors. But either way, one thing is quite clear. Muhammad Yunus is losing the plot. He promised to steady the ship after Sheikh Hasina's ouster. But he's failed spectacularly so far. The students are having their way. The radical Islamists are having their way. And minorities are running for cover. It's a major worry for neighboring India. Yesterday, New Delhi issued a reminder to Dhaka. It asked Yunus to protect Hindus and other minorities. It also slammed the arrest of the Hindu priest. And how did Dhaka respond? With a long statement that basically said, mind your own business. This is our internal matter. Now, India's opposition parties are also piling the pressure. The Congress party issued a statement today. They asked New Delhi to exert pressure on Dhaka to ensure that minorities are protected in Bangladesh. But frankly, it's all up to Yunus now. While he was away hugging Joe Biden and touring Baku for the COP29 summit, he ceded space to radicals. If he's in with them, all bets are off. If he isn't, he needs to act fast, use his powers to push back radical Islamist elements. Otherwise, Bangladesh as we know it may not survive. Now to India's other chaotic neighbor, Pakistan. Over the past few days, it saw a massive protest by Imran Khan's supporters. The campaign was being led by his wife, Bushra Bibi. Tens of thousands of protesters had gathered in Islamabad. The scenes were violent and chaotic. But last night, the story took a dramatic turn. Bushra Bibi fled the scene. The government cracked down hard and the protesters bolted. How did it happen? Does this mean that this protest is over? Where is Bushra Bibi and what happens to Imran Khan, who has been in jail for 15 months now? First, let's look at the scale of this protest. Imran Khan's supporters had come from all over the country. They entered Islamabad by breaching barricades. They were marching towards Pakistan's parliament building. They were going to hold a sit-in protest and not move until Imran Khan was finally released. Also, look at the line of protesters. This was their convoy yesterday. It was a massive show of force. But cut to today, this is what Islamabad looks like. The roads are mostly empty except for security personnel. Cleanup work is underway and the protesters are nowhere to be seen. How did the Pakistani government manage to get rid of all of them? It was a midnight operation conducted in pitch darkness. The authorities shut off the lights in central Islamabad and they deployed troops under the cover of darkness. The Pakistani forces fired torrents of tear gas. They charged at the protesters, causing them to break rank and flee. Once it was done, the government was almost gloating about it.
यहाँ पे अपनी गाड़ियाँ छोड़ के, चप्पलें छोड़ के, यहाँ तक कि कुछ लोग अपने कपड़े छोड़ के यहाँ से भागे। मैं तस्वीरें शेयर करूँगा और एक इसकी बकायदा वीडियो रिलीज करेंगे।
Imran Khan himself had called for this protest. He said this was a final call to his supporters, a do-or-die situation, the last chance to save Pakistan's democracy. His call had mobilized thousands of his followers. Just one of their convoys reportedly had more than 34,000 people. That's how many people gathered. But it wasn't enough. One reason for the scale of this government response. It was a violent crackdown. It left at least 2 protesters dead and dozens of others were injured. Hundreds of people were arrested. But apparently this was not the only reason. The protesters failed because they were divided. You see, Imran Khan is in jail. So the march was organized by his party, the PTI, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Senior party leaders led the rallies and convoys, and with them was Imran Khan's wife, Bushra Bibi. She was riding with the biggest convoy, and their plan was quite clear: keep protesting until Imran Khan was released from jail or until he personally told them to back down. But the government threw a spanner in the works. It opened back-channel talks with the PTI. It tried to diffuse tensions by offering a different venue for the protest. It said instead of demonstrating outside Parliament, the protesters should gather on the outskirts of Islamabad. Now, the PTI leaders were reportedly open to this idea, but Bushra Bibi was not. Reports say that she rejected the offer. She was determined to march towards Parliament. So they were divided. And this is not speculation. PTI leaders have spoken about it. So has the Pakistani government, which seems particularly keen to villainize Bushra Bibi. Listen to this.
जो जानी नुकसान, जो माली नुकसान हो रहा है, पिछले 2 दिन में हुआ है, उसकी जिम्मेदार एक औरत है जिनका नाम मैं पहले भी बता दिया आपको। वो होली सोली जिम्मेदार है, ठीक है। इस सारी की सारी फसाद के पीछे वो औरत है।
Bushra Bibi eventually fled last night. Amid the midnight raid, she reportedly went to the neighboring province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is a PTI stronghold. Other senior PTI leaders went there as well. They gave a speech today saying that the protest was still on. But Bushra Bibi did not address the crowd, even though she was supposed to. She did not address the crowd. Why did she not appear? Was she just tired? Or is there really a rift within the PTI? If there is, the Pakistani government is sure to exploit it, and that doesn't bode well for Imran Khan or his supporters. Now let's talk about China, which is making news for a hat-trick. Their third defense minister is under the scanner, the third one in 2 years. President Xi Jinping is investigating him. His name is Admiral Dong Jun. You may have heard of him. Just a few days ago, he met with India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. They met in Laos to discuss the India-China border deal. Now, the same Admiral Dong, the Defence Minister of China, could be sacked. Reports say that he is being investigated for corruption. His 2 predecessors went through the same. Both were investigated by Beijing. Both were found guilty of corruption, and they were ousted. Now it's the turn of Admiral Dong. Will he meet the same fate? Is China going to sack its defense minister for the 3rd time in 2 years? For the moment, Beijing is playing down the story. It has dismissed the report as unfounded.
The Financial Times reported on the possibility of Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun being investigated for corruption. What is the spokesperson's response to this?
It's just shadow chasing.
If that's the case, where is Admiral Dong? Why not bring him before the press? Let him answer some questions. So far, there's no word from the Defense Minister of China, but he's been facing headwinds for a while now. He was not promoted to the Central Military Commission, which is China's top decision-making body in military matters. He was also not appointed to the State Council. Now, the State Council is a powerful body. It executes laws. It oversees government bureaucracy. Usually, China's defense minister holds a seat on this council. That is the norm. But Admiral Dong was not given the seat. It is unclear if he is carrying out his public engagements anymore. He was last seen in Laos. That was his last public appearance. He traveled there for a meeting of Asian defense ministers and defense leaders. That's where he met his Indian counterpart, Rajnath Singh. Dong was also expected to meet the American defense minister, or the defense secretary as the Americans call him. But that meeting never happened. And now Dong is set to be under investigation for corruption. If you follow China, you know that this fits a pattern. This is exactly what happened to the last two defense ministers. There was no formal statement from Beijing. One day they're attending high-profile meetings, the next day they're under probe, and then they disappear without being given a chance to defend themselves in public. Dong's predecessor was Li Shangfu. He was removed 7 months into the job, again over corruption charges. Before Li, the defense minister was Wei Fengyi. He was investigated for corruption after retirement. In June, he was also expelled from the Communist Party of China. All of this was done on the orders of Xi Jinping. Reports say he is overseeing a wave of investigations specifically targeting the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, which is the Chinese army. And now the current defense minister, Admiral Dong, is under scrutiny. So the question is, where does this end? How long will Xi Jinping's purge continue? He started the moment he took office in the year 2012. He launched a war on corruption and promised to go after tigers and flies. Tigers are the big players, flies are the low-level officials. In the last 12 years, Xi Jinping has cracked down on millions of people. He has targeted every wing of the Chinese government. In the last decade, more than 4 million cases have been registered. 4 million cases. And almost 5 million people have been punished. But it hasn't ended corruption in China, and it hasn't fixed accountability. Because look at the top officials who are being purged. Most of them were appointed by Xi Jinping himself. Reports say Admiral Dong was picked by Xi after a rigorous vetting process, after a search that lasted 4 months. Dong was appointed in December 2023 by the president himself, 11 months ago, and he is most likely already on his way out. Is Xi Jinping going to take responsibility for his decisions? Also, what does this constant churn mean for the Chinese military, for their morale and their engagements with the rest of the world? Take India, for instance. A few days back, India was engaging with Admiral Dong. Now he may be sacked. So if there's another flare-up at the border, who should Indian officials speak to? Who should they call? The PLA officers on the ground, their generals, or the defense minister if China even has one? The PLA is caught in a seemingly endless cycle of sackings, and it betrays the decay in the system. Xi Jinping wanted his forces to be war-ready by 2027. At this rate, it's not happening. And this one too is on the president.
I'm pleased to announce that their governments have accepted the United States proposal to end the devastating conflict between Israel and Hezbollah.
Let's turn to West Asia. There's been a step towards peace in the region. A ceasefire has been agreed upon, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. This has the potential to bring peace to the war-torn nation of Lebanon, but only if it holds. The war has been on for 14 months, since the 8th of October last year, the day after the Hamas attack on Israel. Hezbollah started firing at Israel on October 8, 2023, and Israel has been striking back. Before we move further, a quick primer. Hezbollah is a political party and a militant group. It is backed by Iran. Hezbollah is based in the country of Lebanon, but it does not represent all the Lebanese people. Hezbollah operates independently of the Lebanese government and armed forces. It is Hezbollah and not Lebanon that got into a war with Israel last year. But all Lebanese people have been suffering as a result. They have paid a heavy price. Almost 3,800 people have been killed in Lebanon. More than 15,500 are injured. These are both members of Hezbollah and Lebanese civilians. More than 1 million Lebanese people have been displaced. Then there's the damage. The World Bank estimates that the war has cost Lebanon $8.5 billion. This is both in damages and economic losses. As you can see, the war has devastated Lebanon. But Israel has suffered losses to Hezbollah as well. It has lost 45 civilians and 73 soldiers. About 60,000 Israelis have fled their homes in the north as well. And the country is facing high inflation and low growth. Things aren't as bad for Israel as they are for Lebanon, but the Israelis are also paying a price. Israel also had other reasons to opt for a ceasefire.
Why should we have a ceasefire now? For three main reasons. The first reason is to focus on the Iranian threat, and I will not expand on that. The second reason is to give our forces a breather and replenish stocks. And the third reason for having a ceasefire is to separate the fronts and isolate Hamas.
That was Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explaining the decision to his citizens. So both countries decided to try and work out a ceasefire, both Israel and Lebanon. Lebanon was negotiating on behalf of Hezbollah. It has promised to keep the militant group in check. That is why the ceasefire could come about. That is how it could come about. The deal was brokered by the US with help from France. US President Joe Biden explained how it would work.
Over the next 60 days, the Lebanese army and state security forces will deploy and take control of their own territory once again. Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon will not be allowed to be rebuilt. And over the next 60 days, Israel will gradually withdraw its remaining forces. And civilians on both sides will soon be able to safely return to their communities.
Let's show you a map of Israel and Lebanon. The border between the two is known as the Blue Line. There's a river to the north of the Blue Line. It is called the Litani River. The ceasefire deal says that Hezbollah will withdraw from the border areas and move north beyond this river. Israeli forces will retreat as well. They will move back into their own territory, south of the Blue Line. This will create a buffer zone between Israel and the Litani River. No Hezbollah fighters, no Israeli troops, only civilians. Lebanon's army will have the task of ensuring this. They will be the only armed forces allowed to patrol this buffer zone, and they will have support from the US and France. That is the essence of the ceasefire deal.
On this day, the 1,000-mile journey begins to rebuild what was destroyed and to complete strengthening the role of legitimate institutions, at the forefront of which is the army, on which we place great hopes to extend the state's authority over the whole nation and strengthen its presence in the wounded south.
The Lebanese government is hopeful. It wants peace to return, but Hezbollah remains a wild card. The militant group is reeling right now. Israel killed their longtime leader Hassan Nasrallah and other senior members too. Hezbollah agreed to the ceasefire so that it could regroup and chalk out its future strategy. So we don't know how long it will abide by the ceasefire. Israel doesn't know either, which is why it has issued a warning.
The duration of the ceasefire depends on what will happen in Lebanon. In full understanding with the United States, we maintain full military freedom of action. If Hezbollah violates the agreement and tries to arm itself, we will attack. If it tries to renew terrorist infrastructure near the border, we will attack.
The ceasefire is in place, but if Hezbollah tries anything, Israel will end it. The situation is extremely fragile, so let's hope that peace and calm heads prevail.
और आगे की यात्रा की बेहतर योजना बनाने के अवसर प्रदान करते हैं। ऐसे समारोह हमारी एकता को मजबूत बताने की तथा ये दर्शाते हैं कि राष्ट्रीय लक्ष्यों को प्राप्त करने के प्रयासों में हम सब एक साथ हैं। हमारे स्वाधीनता संग्राम के दौरान अनेक महान विभूतियों ने हमारे राष्ट्रीय आदर्शों को रेखांकित किया था। हमारी संविधान सभा में हमारे देश की विविधता को अभिव्यक्ति मिली थी। संविधान सभा में सभी प्रांतों और क्षेत्र के प्रतिनिधियों की उपस्थिति से अखिल भारतीय चेतना को शोर मिला था। संविधान सभा के वाद विवाद तथा सदस्यों के संबोधनों में हमें संविधान निर्माण की प्रक्रिया के साथ साथ अपने देश के बारे में गहरी जानकारी प्राप्त होती है। आज जिन पुस्तकों का विमोचन किया गया तथा जो शॉर्ट फिल्म्स दिखाए गए, उनमें लोगों को हमारे संविधान निर्माण के गौरवशाली इतिहास का परिचय प्राप्त होगा। एक अर्थ में भारत का संविधान कुछ महानतम मेधावी लोगों द्वारा लगभग 3 वर्षों के विचार विमर्श का परिणाम था, लेकिन सही अर्थ में ये हमारे लंबे स्वाधीनता संग्राम का परिणाम था। उस अतुलनीय राष्ट्रीय आंदोलन के आदर्शों को संविधान में अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण स्थान दिया गया। उन आदर्शों को सुस्पष्ट और संक्षिप्त रूप से संविधान की प्रस्तावना में व्यक्त किया गया है। ये आदर्श है न्याय, स्वतंत्रता, समता और बंधुता। ये आदर्श सदियों से भारत को परिभाषित करते हैं। संविधान की प्रस्तावना में उल्लिखित आदर्श एक दूसरे के पूरक है। समग्र रूप से
The United States has a drug problem. In the last decade, it's killed nearly 400,000 people, 4 lakh people. And the deadliest drug in this mix is fentanyl. It's potent and it is taking over the country. But who is to blame for this crisis? Donald Trump says it is China. So he wants to slap new tariffs on China, 10% to start with.
So we lose 300,000 people a year to drugs entering from Mexico. And if they don't stop this poison from flooding into our country, and they can stop it by not accepting it from China, and I'm doing the same thing with China, we're going to tariff the hell out of them.
Trump says Beijing has not done enough to curb the flow of illegal drugs into the US, especially fentanyl, and that is why he wants to impose tariffs. China has obviously denied this charge, adding that tariffs will impact bilateral ties.
I think the first thing most for us to do perhaps is to continue the good relation momentum between our two countries and see what we can do together to promote for global trade instead of compromising our respective national interest and our common interest. Thank you.
So what exactly is fentanyl? Fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid. It was developed as an anesthetic. Hospitals use it to treat pain medically. It is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, far more powerful than heroin, and that makes it extremely dangerous if overused. Also, you can easily get addicted to it. Right now, fentanyl is at the center of America's drug crisis. In 2023, 75,000 people died due to fentanyl overdose. It's the worst drug crisis in American history, affecting almost an entire generation. And where is this fentanyl coming from? It first arrived in the US in the 1970s. The drug was called China White. Its consumption boomed in the 2010s, and the US says that China is the primary source of the drug. When this crisis exploded, Washington cracked down, so drug cartels changed tack. They now transport chemicals from China, chemicals that are used to make fentanyl. And these chemicals are transported by air, disguised as gadgets, even shopping merchandise. These boxes pass through customs, no one bats an eyelid. From there, they are sent to Mexican drug labs. And this is where they are turned into fentanyl. Those chemicals are turned into fentanyl in Mexico, and that fentanyl is shipped across the border to the US. It's a complicated supply chain, China to Mexico to the US, but one that escapes all scrutiny. So the drugs are flowing in from Beijing. Why isn't the US stopping them? Well, they've tried. The Americans tried to work with the Chinese to deal with the problem. In 2019, China put all forms of fentanyl on a list of controlled substances. Basically, their use and sale was monitored heavily. It was a breakthrough for Trump in his first term. He was still the president then. And things were looking fine until 2022. But that's when Nancy Pelosi decided to visit Taiwan. 2022. She was the House Speaker, the US House Speaker at the time. She visited Taiwan and that angered China. So they suspended all communication with the Americans, including on narcotics. In 2023, US President Joe Biden met Xi Jinping. He restarted the conversation. They may be working together again on this, but now China does not think that this is their problem. China believes that the fentanyl crisis is America's problem and a problem of America's own making. Donald Trump, of course, disagrees, so he has announced tariffs and his team is out for blood. Take Howard Lutnick, for example. He will be Trump's Commerce Secretary. In October, he said that China was attacking America with fentanyl. And his solution? 200% tariffs on Chinese goods. This man will be the Commerce Secretary. It tells you how Trump's team is approaching this. They're looking at other measures too, like sanctioning banks doing business with drug sellers, mass sanctions on drug companies, cyber warfare against cartels, and treating this crisis like the war on terror. Basically, nothing really is off the table. And that means more pressure on the US-China relationship, which is already under a lot of strain. Things only began stabilizing in 2023, and now Donald Trump's sanctions could put the ties back on life support.
I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing.
Trump dropped his tariff bomb on Monday night. Nearly 90 minutes later, he got a phone call. On the other side was Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, a worried Justin Trudeau. You see, the United States is Canada's biggest trading partner. Their bilateral trade is worth $900 billion. Canada's exports make up more than half of that. In fact, 75% of Canada's goods exports end up in the US. Now imagine a 25% tariff on that trade. What will happen? Canadian goods will become more expensive in the US, and gradually American consumers will shift away from them. Experts say that this will mean a big hit to Canada's GDP, perhaps more than 2.5%. That's how much they stand to lose. This should explain why Justin Trudeau got all worked up and got on the phone. His approval numbers are already in the dumps, so the last thing he wants is a trade war with America, one that could affect Canadian businesses.
We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do, laying out the facts, moving forward in constructive ways.
Other than possibly imploring Trump, what can Trudeau do? He's looking to create a unified response. Trudeau will meet heads of the provincial governments today, sort of like the chief ministers in India, the Canadian parallel to that. And now some of these provincial leaders or provinces are ruled by opposition parties. And they actually share Trump's concerns on border security, on illegal migration, and on drug smuggling. So Justin Trudeau cannot assume a united front at home. He must forge it. Yesterday, he updated the Canadian Parliament about Trump's plan. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre targeted Trudeau. He asked why the Prime Minister was not better prepared for this scenario. After all, Donald Trump was a frontrunner for most of 2024.
Despite the fact the Prime Minister has known for years that Trump was threatening these tariffs, and for 3 weeks that President Trump had won the election, the only plan he has is a Zoom call Where's the plan to put Canada first?
We're working with all the premiers, pulling together in a Team Canada approach, because that's how we defend Canadian jobs from coast to coast to coast. I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a continent.
As always, the worst suggestion came from Jagmeet Singh, leader of the New Democratic Party. Do you know what was his solution to Trump's tariffs? Call the next US president a bully.
The only thing a bully responds to is strength. So where is our plan to fight back? Where is the war room? Where is a concrete plan to bring our issue before CUSMA?
Classic Jagmeet Singh, make a bad situation worse. But coming back to Justin Trudeau, what is he up to here? What is his plan for Trump 2.0? Trump's win is a setback for Trudeau. They never got along in Trump's first term, so much so that there was name-calling. At a NATO summit a few years back, Donald Trump called Justin Trudeau two-faced. But Trudeau is trying to spin this. He says, I have dealt with Trump before. I weathered the Trump storm from 2017 to 2021, so I can do it again. Frankly, it's a long-shot strategy. But that's how desperate Trudeau is. He's also planning to revive a lobbying tactic from Trump's first term. It was called Team Canada. The plan was to find a way around Trump, mainly by lobbying US lawmakers and Trump's advisors, to nudge them away from Trump's extreme positions. Just one problem though, the Trudeau of 2024 is not the Trudeau of 2017 or 2018. He was a lot more acceptable back then. His position at home was relatively solid. But that's not the case anymore. Canadians are unhappy with the rising cost of living. Trudeau's own supporters are outraged by his support to Israel. And we saw that last week. Violent anti-Israel and anti-NATO protests broke out in Montreal. Protesters clashed with riot cops. They also destroyed shops and public property. And where was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau when all of this happened? He was dancing at a Taylor Swift concert. I'm not making this up. Take a look. Two surprises there. One, that Trudeau would be so tone deaf, and two, that someone other than Jagmeet Singh made him dance. But jokes aside, this is a big challenge for Justin Trudeau. Remember, he doesn't have a majority in Parliament anymore. He runs a minority government. If elections are held today, Trudeau would lose, and quite badly at that. So the Trump presidency comes at a very important time for him. Canadians know that they have a volatile leader down south and an incompetent leader at home. So they're bracing for crash and burn. Now let's turn our attention to the UK, which is witnessing a crisis of joblessness. More than 9 million people are not employed or looking for a job in the United Kingdom. So their economy is flatlining faster and the cost of benefits is surging. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has finally noticed the elephant in the room. He has declared that Britain is not working. Now, he wants to force 2 million people into work. He wants to overhaul the job market, and he has unveiled a plan to do it. But critics are worried that this plan is the equivalent of a band-aid on a deep wound. What does it include, and will it work? Here's a report.
The UK is working through a crisis of joblessness. 1.5 million people are unemployed. Additionally, 2.8 million people are out of work due to long-term sickness. This has been a major driver of joblessness since the pandemic. In total, economic inactivity has soared beyond 9 million. This includes people who are not employed or actively looking for work. It's the highest among Britons aged 16 to 24. 1 in 8 young people is out of work. This is a glaring problem for Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He made a bold declaration about the elephant in the room. He said that Britain simply isn't working. It indeed is not. And this is the result. Britain's economy is flatlining and their welfare bill is spiraling. This includes benefits and financial support for people who are looking for a new job, are out of work, or affected by health issues. The cost of benefits is rising, and so is the burden on the Treasury. So the UK wants to shave more than £3 billion from the welfare bill over the next 4 years. In order to do that, Starmer wants to boost employment. By how much? From its current level of 75% to 80%. This means bringing about 2 million people into work. It's a bold ambition, but Starmer claims he has a plan. He has unveiled the Get Britain Working Again white paper. Think of it as a government pledge to overhaul the job market. It includes 4 main measures. First, guaranteed access to apprenticeships and training for the young, so they can get the skills and education to find a job. Secondly, rebranded job centres which help people with the resources to find jobs. Thirdly, independent reviews of UK employers to promote inclusive workplaces. And fourth, the expansion of mental health support. While many details about the plan are yet to be revealed, Starmer claims that this can fix the problem of joblessness, that it will put an end to the culture of blaming and shaming people who for too long haven't been getting the support they need to get back to work. But critics aren't sure. They have likened it to simply throwing money or putting a band-aid on the problem. They say that Starmer is putting pressure on people, especially the young, to do the heavy lifting, from undertaking training to going through with placements, while braving the threat that they may lose benefits if they don't comply. The Starmer government should instead focus on the crumbling health infrastructure, the National Health Service, and look to create more jobs. Without this, real change could be years away. Critics claim it's a disappointing package of reforms, which will do little to persuade the young to work. But only time will tell if they're proven wrong.
Have you heard of DEI? It stands for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. Separately, everyone supports these goals, but if you put them together, it becomes a culture war issue. DEI is basically an organizational goal or campaign, a bid to promote diversity in your ranks, like hiring LGBTQ workers or more women workers or workers from marginalized communities. The idea is to make the workplace diverse by setting quotas for these categories. After 2020, a lot of American companies bought into it. The reason was the death of George Floyd, a black American man who was killed by a police officer. His death triggered worldwide protests. It started conversations on promoting diversity and so companies jumped along basically. They announced reservations in jobs to promote diversity voluntarily. Cut to 2024, America is a different place. Donald Trump is heading back to the White House. Twitter is X and owned by Elon Musk. So companies are rethinking their DEI commitments. Walmart, for example, is rolling them back. They will no longer consider race or gender while picking suppliers. They will stop DEI training. They will not take part in equality ratings, which is a metric created by an LGBT group. And they will curb support for pride events and drag marches. It's a pretty comprehensive rollback by Walmart. So what is Walmart's reasoning for this? Listen to what they've said, and I'm quoting, "Our purpose is to help people save money and live better. We can deliver on it because we are willing to change alongside our associates and customers who represent all of America." Now that statement does not reveal much, but it's clear why Walmart is doing this. DEI policies have been targeted by US conservatives. They say it's part of the woke virus, that it discriminates against white workers. Some conservatives have threatened to boycott such brands, and now they have a megaphone. Two, in fact, Donald Trump as president, Elon Musk as the owner of X. So companies are eager to scale back DEI. They want to limit the blowback. And it's not just Walmart. Bloomberg published a survey recently. It found that more than 50% of the firms had tweaked their DEI terminology. Some of them dropped the D, some dropped the I, and most of them dropped the E, which stands for equity. Apparently, the old language was controversial. The likes of Ford, Harley-Davidson and Toyota have also rolled back DEI. Donald Trump has clearly been the biggest trigger here, but the US Supreme Court is also responsible. You see, in June 2023, they passed a historic verdict. They abolished affirmative action at American colleges. Now, affirmative action is a bit like DEI. It is a mandatory quota in college admissions. It gave more opportunities to students from marginalized communities. In 2023, the court scrapped this quota. This decision had a domino effect. Companies began rethinking DEI policies, and Donald Trump's return pushed them over the edge. Now, I know that this is a contentious issue. So instead of politics, let's look at the facts. Is DEI good for companies? Let me show you a study from 2020. It analyzed 1,000 firms in the United States. Those with high numbers of women leaders had 25% more profits than average. So more women leaders, more profits. That is what the survey found. Same with ethnicity and culture. Those with higher diversity had 36% more profitability. As they say, numbers do not lie. A diverse workforce is a happier workforce. It's a less attrition workforce, and it's a more talented workforce. You have people from different backgrounds and culture working together. This improves efficiency. But nobody highlights this angle of DEI. They always talk about social justice or doing the right thing. But guess what? Not everyone wants to do the right thing. They just want to flow with the times. And that's what's happening in the US right now. In 2020, supporting DEI was fashionable, both politically and socially, so companies hopped onto the bandwagon. In 2024, DEI is not fashionable, so those very same companies are hopping off. This is inconsistent and unfair. But what's the solution? Experts say highlight the financial gains. Just look at this study in the Harvard Business Review. It links DEI policies to massive monetary gains. A 2 times increase in shareholder returns, a 1.5 to 3 times increase in revenue. Show these numbers to board members and shareholders. Appealing to their conscience is a losing battle. Instead, appeal to their capitalist instincts. The year is nearing its end, and if we were to eulogize 2024, we'd say this has been the brattiest year on record. And this is not an insult, even if it sounds like one, because for about a century, the word brat has been used to describe a child who behaves badly. But this year, the word was redefined, thanks to British pop star Charli XCX. She sang about women who don't conform. She called them brat, and the word went viral. It became a rage among Gen Z. US presidential candidate Kamala Harris gave her social media a brat rebrand. Collins Dictionary called it the word of the year. So now brat describes admirable traits. It screams confidence and independence. But that is not the only word to undergo a Gen Z makeover and make it to the Linguistic Hall of Fame. Another word is demure. It means quiet, shy, or well-behaved. It is usually used to describe women. But thanks to a viral TikTok, internet fame knocked on the demure door. This year, its usage surged by 1,200%. It had 200 times more searches on dictionary.com, so the online dictionary made a very mindful choice and declared demure its word of the year. So demure is an overnight celebrity now. It has taken on new life and is being used in satire, mainly for mocking stereotypical femininity, and apparently also for cancelling student debt in the US. But do you know what's hardly demure, hardly mindful? Another word that has joined this exclusive club: enshittification. Australia's Macquarie Dictionary has declared it the word of the year. Enshittification describes the feeling that things are getting progressively worse in the economy, in politics, and especially in all things digital. Like a once useful micro-blogging site that was enshittified by a tech bro takeover. Don't call us out, that's a totally made-up example. But do you know what else feels really made up? A word turned viral trend / conspiracy theory turned word of the year by the Cambridge Dictionary. I'm talking about manifest, meaning to imagine achieving something and believing that the idea alone will make it come to life. It may sound like a cult manifesto, but manifest has been looked up about 130,000 times this year. This word got about the same celebrity endorsements as Kamala Harris's campaign. So these are the 4 big winners this year. But some other words were in the running as well, like delulu or delusional, kind of like Pakistan's Imran Khan's protest expectations. Or mid, meaning you can't really complain about something, but it gives you no joy. Like working at JP Morgan, where your CEO champions a 3.5-day work week, but you still have to work from Monday to Friday. Then there is the Taylor Swift-inspired era, meaning a distinct period in life or career, like Justin Trudeau's poorly timed Swiftie era. Or brain rot, which is the inability to think clearly after consuming too much low-quality content. We imagine that's what North Korean soldiers are going through in Russia after discovering the internet and porn. Love or hate these words, one thing is clear: Gen Z has successfully yassified the dictionary. The English vocabulary includes roughly 1 million words, yet all the crowned words of this year are a sign of these digital times. If you wonder, does anyone actually use these words? Aren't they degrading the language? Can anyone understand them without an explanation? If you wonder all these things, you're not off the mark. But lexicographers, or the people who put dictionaries together, are increasingly looking at social media, because that's where words are building momentum, taking a life of their own, shaping movements and influencing everything from pop culture to politics. So you're not delulu if you think that these notable words are less about linguistics and more about a vibe. The situation is mid, but the young are brat enough to ignore this existentialism. Since the beginning of time, young people have found exclusive terms to describe the world they live in. This is the circle of life, you could say. And words of the year celebrate this linguistic variation to a ridiculous degree, or what we may call a very demure, very mindful, great and shittening.
और आगे की यात्रा की बेहतर योजना बनाने के अवसर प्रदान करते हैं। ऐसे समारोह हमारी एकता को मजबूत बताने की तथा ये दर्शाते हैं कि राष्ट्रीय लक्ष्यों को प्राप्त करने के प्रयासों में हम सब एक साथ हैं। हमारे स्वाधीनता संग्राम के दौरान अनेक महान विभूतियों ने हमारे राष्ट्रीय आदर्शों को रेखांकित किया था। हमारी संविधान सभा में हमारे देश की विविधता को अभिव्यक्ति मिली थी। संविधान सभा में सभी प्रांतों और क्षेत्र के प्रतिनिधियों की उपस्थिति से अखिल भारतीय चेतना को शोर मिला था। संविधान सभा के वाद विवाद तथा सदस्यों के संबोधनों में हमें संविधान निर्माण की प्रक्रिया के साथ साथ अपने देश के बारे में गहरी जानकारी प्राप्त होती है। आज जिन पुस्तकों का विमोचन किया गया तथा जो शॉर्ट फिल्म्स दिखाई गई, उनमें लोगों को हमारे संविधान निर्माण के गौरवशाली इतिहास का परिचय प्राप्त होगा। एक अर्थ में भारत का संविधान कुछ महानतम मेधावी लोगों द्वारा लगभग 3 वर्षों के विचार विमर्श का परिणाम था, लेकिन सही अर्थ में ये हमारे लंबे स्वाधीनता संग्राम का परिणाम था। उस अतुलनीय राष्ट्रीय आंदोलन के आदर्शों को संविधान में अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण स्थान दिया गया। उन आदर्शों को सुस्पष्ट और संक्षिप्त रूप से संविधान की प्रस्तावना में व्यक्त किया गया है। ये आदर्श है न्याय, स्वतंत्रता, समता और बंधुता। ये आदर्श सदियों से भारत को परिभाषित करते हैं। संविधान की प्रस्तावना में उल्लिखित आदर्श एक दूसरे के पूरक है। समग्र रूप से ये सभी आदर्श ऐसा वातावरण उपलब्ध कराते हैं जिसमें हम नागरिक को फूलते फलते समाज में योगदान देने तथा साथी नागरिकों की मदद करने का अवसर मिलता है। माननीय संसदगण, संविधान की भावना के अनुसार कार्यपालिका, विधायिका और न्यायपालिका का ये दायित्व है कि वे सामान्य लोगों के जीवन को सुगम बनाने के लिए
A new Tesla robot is coming soon. It's called the Tesla Optimus. It may look like a stormtrooper that took Ozempic, but Elon Musk has made some lofty promises. He says it can do anything that you want, like the ultimate household companion. Need a butler? Optimus is here. Want someone to rant to? Well, Optimus is all ears. And the humanoid robot already has takers. Kim Kardashian calls it her new friend, but the internet is not so sure. Take a look.
Okay, hi. Can you do this? I love you. You know how to do that? Okay, what should we do? Go running. Let's go for a run. Do you know how to do? Oh, you are Hawaiian. Okay.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Seoul records its largest November snowfall in over a century. Russian airliner catches fire after landing in Turkey's Antalya. And orcas make a rare appearance in the water surrounding Canada's Vancouver. And on this day in 1895, Swedish dynamite millionaire Alfred Nobel signed his last will. In this will, Nobel specified that a bulk of his fortune would be set aside as a fund. This fund would be used for prizes to those who shall have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. This led to the establishment of the Nobel Prize that we know today. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Very warm welcome. You're watching The Right Stand. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. In a shocking development, Bangladesh, the